In this movie, we're going to look at bullet and number lists. And I'm going to start off with a list about lists. So if you are working with bullets, here is some advice. Unless it's a full sentence, don't end it with a period. Use ragged alignment, even if your body text is justified. Control the spacing between the bullets. Don't use hyphenation with bulleted items. You want to make sure that you keep the lines together. That's something that you can do with keep options, and I'll be having a movie about keep options later on. Choose to ignore optical margin alignment when working with bulleted text. This is a rather obscure feature. When we get to optical margin alignment, I will point out exactly what that is. And then when your lists are long, you might consider splitting them into multiple columns. We're going to do some of this. But first, let's add bullets to our list. So I'm going to select this text to apply bullets, come up to the control panel and this icon right here. Now, in fact, you can click on either one of these two if you hold down the Option or Alt key, and it takes you to the same place. And we want to hold down the Option or Alt key because we need to set some of these options. So we want this to be a bulleted list. Let's turn on the preview so we can see what we're going to get. And you can choose a bullet character. And if you don't like any of these, you can just come and add one, either from your current font or you can choose a different font. But I'm going to use this one for now. Here you specify what comes after the bullet, and this is the code for a tab, but you might also consider an M space or an N space. And then here we can choose a character style to apply just to the bullet character. Now it's defaulted to this because this is how I had it set up before, but you can choose from your available character styles, and if you don't have one already made, you can come and make one. Now we get to choose the indentation, and this relates to the size. So the size of the type here I think is 24 points. So I'm going to indent by 24 points, and then my first line indent I'm going to make minus 24 points. And you can see that creates a hanging indent. I'll go ahead and click OK. Now I'm going to move on to the next page, and here I want to point out a couple of things. You don't have to have a hanging indent. Here I have the bullets flushed. And if we take a look at these options, you can see that I've not specified a left indent or a first line indent. That's also a valid approach. But typically, bullets tend to hang to the left of the rest of the text in the paragraph. The other point I'm making here is that we want to use this spacing value, space between paragraphs using the same style, to control the spacing between the bullets. Now, in the case of the bullets, I have 9 points of space before them and 9 points of space after. This is something that is part of the bullet paragraph style. To get to that, by the way, I just right-clicked, chose Edit, Indents and Spacing. So we have 9 points of space before, 9 points of space after. Let me just reset this to ignore. We can see how that's going to affect things. So now we have 9 points of space between all of the paragraphs, including the bulleted items, and that's too much. But this option, which is relatively new, allows us to get away with just a single bullet style. We don't need to have a starting and an ending bullet style. And here I'm going to say I only want half as much space between paragraphs using the same style. So we still get the 9 points before the bulleted list, 9 points after the bulleted list, but half of that amount between the bullet items. I mentioned splitting a list. Here's a case in point. Maybe I want to select all of these items in the list and then split them. To do so, I need to come to my control panel. Now, if your screen is wide enough, you may see this option on your control panel. Mine isn't, so I have to go to the control panel menu and come down to span columns. Now, span is actually the opposite of what we want. What we want is to split. And I'm going to split this into 2 subcolumns. Let's turn on the preview so we can see what we're going to get. And I can specify the spacing between those columns. Now let's look at numbered lists, and these work in much the same way as bulleted lists. Perhaps the most obvious point I can make is that the numbers will automatically update if you change the order of the items. I want to drag this piece of selected text to the top of my numbered list. And if you're attempting to do that and you can't, like me, then you will need to come to the type preferences and enable drag and drop editing in layout view. So now I can just drag that up to the top and we see that becomes number 1. Just as with bulleted lists, if I want to change the color of the numbers, I'll come to my paragraph formats and then Option or Alt click on the number list icon. I can apply a character style to the number itself. I have my preview turned on. But another issue that we run into, and we see it here in the text on the left, is that the alignment of the numbers falls out of whack when we go from single-digit numbers to 2-digit numbers. So we need to adjust the indent settings here in order to fix this. So let's come back to my bullets and numbering by holding Option or Alt and clicking on that. We'll have the character style applied to the number. And just before I get to the indent amounts, let me just mention this right here. Again, we see the tab character, which comes after the number. This is the token for the number. I could, if I want, have a period after the number, but in this case, I don't think that's necessary. So what I need to do here is change the alignment, and this is just the alignment of the number, not the whole paragraph. I need to change the alignment of the number to right, and then I need to adjust the indent amounts. It's important to know that the size of type in this case is 16 points. And my left indent is only giving me enough room for a single-digit number. So I'm going to double that amount. And that alone fixes it. You may, on some occasions, need to adjust the exact amount of first line indent, but we can see that by doubling the amount of left indent, leaving us room for a 2-digit number, in combination with the number being aligned right, that solves the problem.